Hey everybody, Mike Schumann and Seth Tao here for another episode of the East 17th Street podcast, a podcast by the Daily Hoosier. And Seth, March 23rd, that was the last time Indiana fans experienced a loss by any of IU men's or women's basketball or IU football. Now, admittedly, there's been a lot of days in that gap where there weren't any games being played, but IU is the only Division One school that can claim no losses in men's or women's basketball or football at this particular point in time. And, it is the anniversary of the 1975-76 undefeated national championship men's basketball team. So maybe there's some magic in there.
I was going to say, there's probably, a 4-month span where I think every team in the country can say they didn't experience a loss.
So cynical.
Is that cynical? Is that what we're calling it now?
As I've heard Kurt Signetti say before, this is sports. It's supposed to be fun. Let's try to have some fun here.
Is there magic in there? I mean, maybe that's where you call me cynical when I try to throw water on that.
Yeah, that's water worthy. And we can talk about, in each case, the chances of any of these teams staying undefeated throughout the remainder of their season. But let's start with men's basketball, who is 5-0 following a 73-53 win last night over Lindenwood. I think what stands out right away is just that score. It's second straight game where they've kind of been uninspiring, didn't quite meet expectations. I think they were a 30-point favorite, 30-point margin expected by the metric sites. And what stands out to me in these last two games against teams that, they should just manhandle offensively is that the offense has kind of taken a step back. They've gone up against some new looks in these last two games, talking Incarnate Word and Lindenwood. Incarnate Word threw a lot of zone their way. Lindenwood threw a lot of switching man-to-man, which kind of had the effect, in my opinion, of just kind of neutralizing what Indiana likes to do, which is a lot of movement, a lot of passing, a lot of getting the defense into rotation, where the defense, when they're playing zone or switching, is just kind of standing there watching you do all that, and it doesn't really have a lot of effect. And I asked Darren DeVries last night about it, and he somewhat acknowledged that, they, in practice, they work a lot against, their own style of defense, which is they don't switch, and they've kind of grown accustomed to that. So seems like it's a little bit of work in process in terms of, what they're going to look like when they go up against zones and switching defenses. Obviously, DeVries is not a new coach. He's got his counters to that sort of stuff, but we haven't seen what we have seen is Indiana's offense take a step back the last two games.
Yeah, well, let's start with an anomaly that I just realized as you opened this up. Back-to-back nights, there was a women's game on Wednesday, men's game on Thursday. The women's game finished 72-53. The men's game finished 73-53.
Now, see, if I was going to be cynical like you, I'd say, what's the point of that? There's just
there is no point. That's where I say sports is fun.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I hadn't picked up on that. That's fun.
That just hit me. But anyway, to the not fun stuff. Yeah, you're right. It's just been such a stark difference what we've seen from IU the last two games compared to what we saw from those first three, when the offense was really high flying. And not to say they couldn't miss shots, but they were shooting at such a high clip. And frankly, it was unsustainable. Maybe it's a little jarring for some people to see numbers drop off, that quickly against, some of the same type of competition when you're looking at Incarnate Word and Lindenwood. Incarnate Word and Lindenwood. I can't believe I didn't do that before. When you're looking at those quality of opponents, maybe people, I feel like generally people understood that the numbers that they put up for the first three games probably couldn't be held up for an entire season, but people may not have expected to see those numbers start to dip a bit until you started facing, you got to those Louisville and Kentucky games in December. And, maybe, so is there cause for concern at all? I mean, you can only be so concerned. I think, we're sitting here November 21st. They played 5 games. 3 have been outstanding performances where they looked like they could be a top 10 team in the country. And, 2 have been kind of clunkers, so to speak, and they got the job done. I do think there's value in, Darren DeVries, even after 1 or 2 of those, really good games, in, fielding a lot of questions about, how are they doing this? How good is this? How sustainable is this? He's acknowledged that there are going to be nights for this team where shots just aren't falling at this rate, where the ball is getting stuck more, and where things just aren't flowing offensively. And we're going to have to find a way to win that type of game. And that's really what's going to determine how good this team can be. And so I think some of these, the last 2 games, I think is just part of that process of this team is going to, it may be, like you say, kind of a work in progress and figuring out, okay, how are we going to pull out these type of games when the ball is getting stuck more, when, Tucker's the only one that's sticking any shots consistently. Like, how are we going to be able to pull that game out? And, you don't want to take moral victories too often. And certainly they won the game, so it's more than that. But I think there is something to, games like this, against a Lindenwood, an Incarnate Word, viewing it as we're learning how to win games like this if that comes up again in Big Ten play.
Yeah, I think, us and to a greater extent the fans are probably scarred because, games like this, they've seen this story, the last few years, struggling in games that they should dominate. And I think that probably causes some degree of overreaction of, oh my God, here we go again. But to your initial point there, you look at Indiana's 3-point shooting on the season, even though they haven't shot well the last couple of games, they're at 39.4% from 3 on the season. That's 38th best in the country. That's a dramatic improvement from, where they were over really at any point the last 8 years. And obviously we're only 5 games in and the defenses they face will be better, but it does force you to kind of check your overreaction a little bit. And to that point, on an individual level, excuse me, Lamar Wilkerson, clearly was at an unsustainable clip the first 3 games. I forget what the exact numbers were, but I think it was 15 of 26 from 3, maybe. So,
Ridiculous.
Getting close to like 55-60%. He's been, bad the last couple games. And, but again, you take a step back. What is he for the season? He's 16 of 36, 44.4%. If you asked any IU fan, would you take 44% on high volume this year from Lamar Wilkerson? Absolutely, you would. Tucker DeVries, 20 of 43 on the season, 46.5%. So same thing. Like, those guys are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. I did go back and look, with Wilkerson, he's a high volume shooter, as I said. Like, they're gonna have games like he's had. What he didn't do last year was really the first year that he was like super crazy high volume from 3. He didn't have a lot of back-to-back games like he's had the last 2 games. So certainly something to watch, because I noticed him on the court last night. Like, it was getting to him. Like, he was clearly exasperated. And when he finally made one, like he kind of looked up at the sky and was like shaking his head. Like, he's a guy that wears his emotions on his sleeve anyway. But he'll be interesting to watch. They've got a big game coming up against Kansas State, and he's going to need to shoot a lot better for them to be able to hang in that game.
Yeah, and it's kind of another, point where you may need to check overreactions a bit and just remember, you point out what, his tendencies last year, and he's, for all that this team, has, for the extended run this team had through preseason, all the extra action they had. This is still a pretty new environment for him with a pretty new team that's come together. And so there's a level of comfort that he had at Sam Houston last year that he may still be figuring out. This was only his 4th game at Assembly Hall, 5th if you count the exhibition against Marion. So this is only his 5th game in that arena, I guess if you count whatever he played with Sam Houston State in the past, but his
Right.
fifth game as a Hoosier, in this arena, like there's still, I think you can you can give a guy some slack for, working through some things. And I think from a fan perspective as well, it's just the adjustment to watching this style of basketball where you are shooting this many threes that you're going to have, room for a lot more variance, in both directions when you're shooting as many threes as you have. When you're hot, you can be really hot. And when you're cold, you can be really cold. And generally, if this team is as good as a shooting team as we think it is and as they think they are, water tends to find its level eventually, especially as the season goes on. Yeah, I think Tuesday against Kansas State is going to be a good test. And I think when you look at the rest of the team, I think you can ask some fair questions for how many nights like this, like Lamar Wilkerson, I think was 1 for 7 from 3 last night. I think you can ask some fair questions about how many nights like that can Indiana sustain from Lamar Wilkerson and still win the game, because it's become evident he's that important to this team. But a lot of that, I think, is just, him continuing to settle in Bloomington, and also fans just getting used to, this style of basketball that's so different than what we saw here for the last 8 years.
Yeah. So for people watching on YouTube, we got Ollie sitting there yawning during this podcast. I think I saw 2 yawns. I are dog yawns contagious like human yawns? Did he just cause our entire YouTube watching audience to start yawning?
Let us
Thanks,
know in the
Ollie.
comments, chat.
One of the ways that you can overcome poor shooting against a low major team like Lindenwood or Incarnate Word is to dominate on the inside. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing, is that Indiana doesn't necessarily have that ability. Reed Bailey, to me, is kind of showing that he is more of a kind of a power forward from a skill set standpoint. I think we kind of knew that going in, but you see him struggling a bit to finish over length in the paint, and just not being a physically dominant player like you need in the Big Ten. And Sam Alexis is coming off the bench and kind of providing more of that center type role that you would come to expect that they're going to need in the weeks to come. I was looking at some defensive rebounding numbers, because kind of going off of that, what was it last night? I don't have the stats up, but I think 19 offensive rebounds.
19 offensive rebounds.
Crazy number to give up against a team like Lindenwood. Now, admittedly, they missed 50 shots, so there's going to be more chances for them to get offensive rebounds. But nevertheless, Reed Bailey's defensive rebounding rate is 17.2% this year. I was looking back at the last 3 years. Umar Balo was 23.8%, Khalil Ware was 26.1%, and TJD was 24.8%. So there's a major drop off at the starting 5 in terms of grabbing defensive rebounds. And Sam Alexis is more like 20%. So even he's not anywhere near what they've come to know in the past. So I think this is a major concern of mine about this team. They're neither. Bailey's more athletic than Alexis, but neither one of them are, because Bailey's not real physically strong. They're not like a classic big athletic big man that like you come to know like in the Big Ten. So I'm concerned as I watch teams around the league like Illinois, like Purdue, like Michigan that have length, that are really good rebounding teams. I think I saw Illinois and Purdue are both national top 25 in offensive rebounding. I can see that being a reason why IU loses some games if they don't figure something out in terms of allowing offensive rebounds.
Absolutely. And rebounding in general is just going to stand out more if Indiana isn't shooting, at a really high clip like they did in the first 3 games. Because if you're shooting a lot of threes and hitting a lot of threes, some of those second chance points aren't going to matter as much. And, you can afford to lose the rebounding edge if you're knocking down a ton of shots anyway and not giving up a lot of rebounding opportunities. But I mean, Lindenwood is not some like rebounding force. Like they're like
No.
260 something, I think, in the country in offensive rebounding percentage this year. Like you mentioned Reed Bailey. I mean, Lindenwood's big man was listed as the same height as Reed Bailey. I think they're both 6'10", but at the very beginning of the game, I'm like, there's no way that guy's 6'10". He was, but he just looked so much bigger than Bailey just because
Right.
that's the way that Bailey plays. And I don't say Reed Bailey is a good player. He's shown a lot of, good things that are going to help this team this year. I'm not saying anything in a way that's, oh, he's bad, he's not useful for this team. He's a good, useful player,
Yeah,
but in the
absolutely.
role that they're sticking him in at the 5, you're right. I am a little concerned about that going into a Big Ten play where you always see some of the brutes around the conference, Purdue and Illinois. You usually reference Wisconsin seems to always have some big guys down low like that. Like it's definitely a concern. And you and I talked after the game last night just about how much. I mean, every team could use a Trace Jackson Davis, but how much this team could use a Trace Jackson Davis type because, you have Reed Bailey, who's like that athletic 4, but he doesn't really give you the size or play big enough to, be a constant threat, down in the paint and on the glass. And then you have Sam Alexis coming off the bench who does have that size, but doesn't have the athleticism that you would want in
Right.
that position. So it's just, yeah, the rebounding and size has, when we saw this roster put together in the offseason, that was always the concern is this team going to be able to rebound enough? Are they going to be able to contend with these other big teams that you see around the Big Ten? And I don't know what the answer to that is. I mean, the glass half full way to view this is that maybe this is a team that's going to be built better to win in March Madness than it is to win in the Big Ten. And
It's fair.
I mean, obviously you have to get there first. And that might, if they're able to get there, that might not be a bad thing necessarily to have a team built like that. But I mean, you do have to get through a, 3-4 month long season to get to that point.
It's going to test the coaching staff for sure because it's they can't just rely on like a Trace Jackson Davis to go get 15 rebounds with his athleticism. It's going to have to be a point of emphasis. Sam Alexis said last night they do practice rebounding. They get the pads out and practice, going back and hitting somebody before you go get a rebound. It may be a thing where they have to, kind of just forego a little bit of their transition game on offense and just send all 5 to the glass and just make sure that they're not getting beat up on the offensive glass game after game. Which will obviously kind of impact what they want to do on the other end of the court. But it's got to be a point of emphasis because there's just going to be some games where they're going to be completely outsized, outmanned. They're going to face better athletes, and it may start as soon as Tuesday because you got Kansas State coming in, who's a team that looks a lot better than I thought they were going to be. I think a lot better than most people were projecting. This is a team, admittedly, more of a factor on the offensive end of the court, but they're averaging 94.4 points a game. They, I think, had a very impressive win last night against Mississippi State, 98-77. They play a Big Ten team today. We're recording here Friday right around noon at the moment. They play Nebraska on a neutral court tonight, so you'll get a chance if you want to preview Kansas State. I don't know what channel that's on, but I assume it's on somewhere where you can watch it. And so you'll get a chance to see them go up against a Big Ten team before they travel to Indiana. Probably not the worst thing in the world for IU that Kansas State's playing back-to-back high major games on Thursday and Friday before traveling to Bloomington on Tuesday. Probably not the best thing for Indiana that Tuesday the students will be gone, and I believe that's part of the mini series package. So you'll have no student section at all, and instead the ordinary fan base. I don't know quite how to phrase that, but there's a clear drop off in the energy in the building when the students aren't there for big games. It's not the same. And so Kansas State won't have to face the full force of a peak Assembly Hall, but it should still be a good environment because I think fans have been waiting for a game like this.
Yeah. One last point, I guess, on the rebounding that we were talking about before. You mentioned, maybe they're going to have to sacrifice some of the transition offense and, crash the glass a little harder. And to me, it's like maybe this coaching staff just kind of sees that as, a give and take that they're willing to live with, that they're willing to potentially give up some offensive rebounds and think that it balances out when they're able to get it going in transition, the times that they are able to get the defensive rebounds. Maybe that's just something that they're willing to live with.
Could be, although I think when you're going up against better teams, they're going to capitalize a lot more than Lindenwood did with their second chances. I don't think
Yeah.
Lindenwood scored that much on second chances. I think you're going to see a lot of relatively easy putbacks or kick out threes off of those offensive rebounds against better teams. So I don't know, but one way or another, they have to figure something out, because I think as we keep saying, it's going to be a problem. Kansas State, PJ Haggerty is having a very good season so far. He's kind of the focus of the offense. He's shooting 60% from 2, 47% from 3, putting up staggering numbers. He's going to be a real problem for Indiana. If there's any good news kind of continuing on that theme of rebounding, Kansas State doesn't really put a big lineup on the floor. They do have a 7-footer, Doran Buka, but he doesn't play a lot of minutes. It's mostly, kind of like IU, 6'4", 6'6", 6'9" type of guys. So I expect if Lamar Wilkerson can get back on track and Tucker's on track, this game could be a shootout.
Yeah, and I mean Kansas State, it was looking like they were not anything special, in terms of total rebounds per game. But I guess you need to go check the rebounding rate as well on that. But I mean, honestly, that sort of high flying, shootout type of game might cater to this Indiana team. Really, I mean, you look at how the Marquette game went, especially, and how Indiana just, I mean, that ended up being, 23-point win, if I'm at something like that.
Right.
Indiana was never in real jeopardy in that game, but I mean, there were stretches of that game where it was kind of just a big shootout and it felt like nobody could miss. And, maybe that sort of pace of game, benefits this IU team and is able to kind of light a fire under them and get them rolling. And I mean, it's hard to really say what the atmosphere is going to be, but I mean, frankly, most of this team hasn't experienced what peak Assembly Hall is like anyway. So, most of this IU team. So, I mean, they may not even see a difference that some of the fans would notice.
Yeah. And the other side of that is, how are these IU players going to react themselves to peak Assembly Hall? Like it's a night and day experience from what we've seen the last 2 games. I can tell you that. And it can overwhelm, both sides. Like the energy is just off the charts when it's at its best. We might have to wait until some of the Big Ten games to truly see it, but it's going to test guys like Wilkerson and some of the others that really just about everybody. I don't know how many games like that Tucker DeVries has played in. I imagine a few at Drake and maybe a few at West Virginia, but it's going to test everybody to, see how those environments impact them both at home and on the road, because most of these guys came from the mid-major ranks.
Yeah, I mean, you have Tucker DeVries, who went to West Virginia and, played in the NCAA tournament. Sam Alexis, obviously coming from Florida and, would have seen plenty of those types of games at Florida last year and obviously went on to win the national title. And you have Trent Sisley, who has been on visits, at IU and seen what that atmosphere is going to look like. So, I mean, you're right that it's going to test, I guess, their mettle in that aspect. And I mean, that's one of the interesting aspects of this game to me. I mean, we saw Indiana go up and look really good against a high major team in Marquette. I mean, it's just, you learn a little more about this team every time they step on the court. And I think that's one of the bigger things we're going to learn is just how do they react to, what, even if it's not, what it's going to sound like when Purdue's in town or, what it would be for some of these other games when students are there, big type games, but how are they going to react to kind of turning up the energy level 2-3 times?
Right. So that Kansas State at Indiana game again is Tuesday. It's at 8 p.m. Eastern on FS1. So we'll obviously have plenty of content before, during, and after that game. But I think we've covered enough with the IU men. Let's pivot over to the IU women, also 5-0. little bit different trend line for them right now, coming off a couple high major wins, especially the one on the road at Florida State. I found to be especially impressive. Then followed that up with a 20-point win over Butler the other night, and I what stands out to me is what I would say is trending favorably is kind of the emergence of Lene Beaumont, something we thought would happen, but didn't happen right off the bat. But she's put together a couple good games in a row, and I think when you think about her and Big Z and Shea Chesky as a big three, so to speak, it kind of helps you visualize how this thing could come together a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, Lene, you got to remember with Lene, I mean, she missed all last year with a knee injury, and she'd been back on the court, in basketball activity for a while, before the season started. But I mean, those first few games that were a little slow, a little tough. I mean, those were her first games, real games in like over a year. So
Right.
I'm more than willing to extend some grace there and cut some slack there. And she has looked fantastic the last two games, Florida State and Butler. She's been outstanding. And really, I mean, it's the way that she's shooting. I mean, first off, the outside shooting, knocking down the 3-pointers is going to be big for this team because there's not a lot of that on this roster right now. Shea Chesky can knock them down. And, other than that, like they have a few other people that can shoot threes and some people that I think are going to be threats, I think, as they settle in and figure it out. This is still a young team, keep in mind, especially relative to the men's side. I mean, the men's team is very new, but it's a lot of experience. The women's team is
Right.
very young and has a lot less experience here. So I think getting Lene going from three is big, number one. But number two, I mean, she looks so confident in the mid-range right now when she, kind of drives in and pulls up in the lane or, hits these turnaround jumpers. And not that you want to make a living off of the mid-range statistically, but I mean, it's a big comparison to make, but it's hard not to think a little bit about Grace Berger the way that when I'm watching Lene right now. And I mean, I asked her about that after the game, just the mid-range that she's been looking really good with. I asked her about that after the game, and she said that she religiously watched film of Grace Berger early in her career to kind of work on that. And I mean, you can kind of see it right now. She looks like a budding star.
Yeah, and a lot of people kind of poo-poo the mid-range, but if you can be efficient doing it, I got no problem with it. It's just like I think it's an under practiced art. Everybody focuses on the three and finishing at the rim, but if she's kind of focused in that area and kind of vibing off Grace Berger, then I don't think there's any problem with it.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you about with them, the Butler game, they had 20 turnovers again. They a little bit better under control down at Florida State, although still probably a bigger number than Terry Morin would like. While they're seem to be playing better, do you still have the concerns that could be a problem, that kind of like the men with the rebounding, the women with the turnovers could be something that sinks them in a few games here and once Big Ten play starts?
There's no doubt. I mean, you can't be turning it over at the rate that this team is turning it over right now and win games. I mean, it's the Marshall game that they played before Florida State was particularly egregious. I think they finished with 28 that night, and Lene had 7 herself. And I mean, certainly that's going to lose you games if you do that in Big Ten play. But I mean, even like you said, they had 20 on Wednesday against Butler. And I mean, it was pretty evenly divided. Like Phoenix Stotine off the bench had 4. They had 3 players with 3 and 2 with 2. And it's like, yeah, none of the, having a game with 2, you don't want to have a game with 2 or 3 turnovers as an individual, but that happens. But when you have a team full of players that's having games like that, it's
Right.
going to add up. And it's just, it's tough to, I think, discern, I guess, how much of this is the way this team is going to play. And this is something that is going to be a big long-term concern versus just, 5 games in, still settling in and figuring things out with a really new team. I mean, a true freshman running the point, like it's somewhere in the middle, I'm sure. But certainly that's a concern. And honestly, what might be an even bigger concern for me with the women right now is the way that they're fouling. They've had fouls. They've been in major foul trouble both of the last 2 games. I mean, they had 3 people foul out of that Florida State game, including 2 off the bench. 2 people off the bench and fouled out, and they had several other people in foul trouble. And I just don't think this team is deep enough to be able to foul at the rate that they're fouling and be able to survive. I mean, I'll talk about what impressed me about that Florida State game, I guess, after I make these points. But because it's not all bad with this team, like I might be implying right now. But it's just I don't love the depth on this team right now. I think from what we've seen through the first 5 games, you've seen it in kind of small flashes, and there's some people on the roster that I think they're going to settle in and be better and start giving them a little bit more off the bench. But the problem is particularly in the front court with Big Z, Xenia, Saka, and Guman. I mean, if she gets in foul trouble, this Indiana women are just a different team. They look like a different team when she's on the court versus when she's off the court. And if she's going to get in foul trouble, or obviously if an injury pops up, but if she's going to be in foul trouble, I think it's going to be a big problem for this team, both, in terms of just having depth out there, but certainly you're giving up a lot of rebounding ability too if she's not out on the court. But I just don't think that this team is deep enough to survive fouling at the rate that they're fouling right now.
Speaking of their depth, I wanted to ask you, I'm on Torvik right now looking at the player stats and box score plus minus, and Adessa Noyen, who's a transfer from Virginia, she's got the 3rd highest box score plus minus of anybody on the team in terms of players that are actually playing meaningful minutes. I'm curious what your impressions have been so far. Are you seeing? I know those kind of stats can be misleading on small sample size, so that's why I'm asking. Is like, are you seeing something that suggests that she's going to be a pretty valuable piece of the puzzle here?
See, that's really interesting to me because I have not been overly, moved, I guess, by her like coming off the bench. I mean, she came in and scored 8 points at Florida State. She was one of the people who fouled out coming off the bench. But I mean, when you looking at the plus minus for that game, Adessa Noyen finished minus 13 in that game, and she was the only one to finish in the negatives for plus minus at minus 13 in 13 minutes. And to me, it's just, she's got I don't think she has the athleticism that Big Z has. And to be fair, Mackenzie Holmes didn't have the athleticism that Big Z has. So, that's not necessarily like you have to be like Big Z to be able to thrive here. But it's just, she had 8 points. Noyen had 8 points and 6 rebounds against Butler. And to me, I think you may get in situations where, are they going to have to? They went double big with I think maybe during the Florida State game for a stretch with both Big Z and Noyen on the court together. I don't think Terry really likes doing that. I think you're giving up too much ball handling. To me, I think I see the potential there. I just have not been so wowed by Noyen so far to think that, because like I said, I think it feels like there's been a big drop off when Big Z comes off the court, and typically when she's coming off the court, it's Noyen coming on the court.
Right. Well, something to monitor anyway. Like I said, those kind of stats can be misleading on small sample size, and we are only 5 games in, so we'll see what her impact is.
Yeah. I will say on the Florida State game, though, for all of those concerns of mine that still press on through that, the way that they pulled out that Florida State game really impressed me. They got off to a good start in that game. Florida State kind of cut into the lead and kept it close. It was back and forth for pretty much the rest of the first half. Indiana gets up by 8, I think, early in the third quarter, and then Florida State goes on a huge run at home, cuts it, turns it around, and Florida State's up by 9, and it looks like Indiana was having one of these games that they've had, the same way, the losses early in the season went last year, and against Marshall they didn't play very well and easily could have lost that game. Like some of the things you saw in that game as well, where just mistakes kind of snowballed, and a turnover on one end turned into a sloppy foul on the other end, and things like that. And it was just kind of piling on and really could have spun away from this team. And I was really, really impressed with the way that Terry Morin called the timeout when they were down by 9 and kind of calmed their team down, got them together, reminded them that they're still in it. I was really impressed with the way that they pulled it together from there. It's still early in the season. It's only, that was game 4. They've played 5 games now, but for any concerns I think that you have about the basketball and about, the roster makeup, I think that game showed me the way that they pulled that out. They, surge back and take the lead back, early mid fourth quarter, and see it out from there and get a really clutch bucket from Journey Kiyaku, who had played like 6 minutes the whole game, and comes in and hits the biggest basket of the game over like a 6'6" center, which, I mean, that's a lot of size you're giving up there in the women's game. I was really impressed with, for all of the concerns that I've outlined about this team, the way they pulled out that Florida State game shows me that this team has the right stuff between the ears to be able to succeed through a long season. And that's big.
Yep. And I didn't mention Journey Kyaku. She actually, because she's only played 10% of the minutes, she actually has the second highest box score plus minus on the team behind Shea. But I think 10% of the minutes, what would that be, like 20 total minutes on the season? So
yeah, I mean, she has. There have been games that she hasn't even played in.
Right. So, but you got to believe, if nothing else, that moment did something for her confidence. We'll see if she can be somebody that, kind of rounds out this rotation, because I think you're spot on. They need other people to provide depth and provide like a stable rotation when they go to the bench, that they don't have a complete drop off. So we'll see how this goes for them. They're doing something right here. They play in Fort Myers, Florida next week. Their first game is Tuesday, and they stay there for basically a week. So they're smarter than we are with their scheduling for this time of year. I assume they're not coming back. There's big gaps in between their games. I assume they're just going to stay down there for the whole week.
I assume. I mean, the first game on Tuesday, so I think they're in an event like over the weekend after Thanksgiving, but I think they have a separate true road game at Florida Gulf Coast before that. So, I mean, that to your point, that is smart scheduling to line that up where you if you have one game leading into an event like that, I mean, I'd assume they're going to stay down there.
Yeah, I certainly would. IU football, 11-0, as everybody on the planet knows, and as you all know, they were on bye this week, so there's no game this weekend. IU fans can get their holiday shopping done. They can watch other games. They can watch the potential, as you laid out this week, for clinching a spot in the Big Ten championship game a week ahead of time without even needing to go 9-0 in the conference. I believe you laid out that Oregon and Michigan need to lose on Saturday. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if you are in any way, shape, or form concerned that Indiana is going to lose to Purdue next week, I guess you can take comfort in the fact that there is a path to getting into the game without beating Purdue. I don't think anybody expects IU to lose to Purdue. But one thing about that Purdue game that caught my eye, it's going to be a repeat of last year's Purdue game from a weather standpoint. The middle of next week, the temperatures in Indiana are going to drop off considerably. You're looking at a high in the mid to low 30s for that game. So probably kickoff, probably low 30s. And don't know about snow yet, but there's no maple missile behind center for Indiana this year. No Canadian quarterback to save them. They've got the Miami boy. So we're going to see Fernando really for the first time this year deal with some inclement weather. How do you think he's going to do?
I don't remember when it was, but didn't somebody ask Kurt Signetti about how he thought Fernando was going to handle, if they played through snow, and he just said something like, "We'll get him a coat."
Yeah, he did say something like that. And then I think he corrected midstream and said, well, maybe we're not allowed to get him a coat, but he's got a coat.
Right. So, I mean, jokes aside, I mean, that's probably just how they view stuff like this. Just it's nothing to them. It's just you go out and you play the game. It doesn't really matter the elements that it's in. I mean, maybe it impacts, the way you game plan and strategize, but I mean, I think it's generally an overblown narrative that like, oh,
Yeah.
snow game, rain, when you're playing through the elements, it's everybody's going to run the football. You can't throw the ball at all. And I always think that's kind of an overblown narrative because I mean, think about the matchups between receivers and defensive backs. And I mean, the receiver is just always naturally going to have a bit of an advantage there in that head to head because the receiver
Right.
knows where he's going. The defensive back is reacting. And when you now have the defensive back, when you're now doing that through, tough conditions for footing, whether it's snow or rain or whatever it is, I mean, or ice, I mean, it just makes it that much harder on the DBs. And so, I mean, for any slight difficulty that it might add to catching the ball, I mean, I think you're going to have, it creates much more of an advantage for the receivers and thus for the passing game. And so I don't know that I'd expect Indiana to struggle with these elements at all. And certainly, I mean, when you talk, I guess to go back to a question you asked at the very beginning, no, I don't think Indiana men's or women's basketball is going to go undefeated. Yes, I think Indiana football is going to finish the regular season undefeated.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I hope people don't lose sight of that because I know, like, as a sports fan, your natural tendency is to just think about what's next, what's next, what's next. But 12-0 for IU football is freaking incredible. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. Like, I think that's like beyond anyone's wildest dreams 2 years ago. And it's probably, you could do a psychological experiment to understand this better, but like how people can immediately flip to like, now it's expected. And, now we want everything. We want it all. We want the CFP. Don't lose sight of Indiana football going 12-0 if in fact they do, because that's an incredible accomplishment that they really up until last year hadn't even sniffed.
Yeah. And I mean, plenty of people are continuing to still pile on to Indiana's scheduling, even though the metrics show that Indiana's schedule has been, much more legitimate than, the group that was out there last year. And not to mention, I mean, think about the outlook of the season and, when we were going game by game and saying, oh, this is, how we think this game is going to go. And I mean, I had them at 10-2 at the beginning of the season. And I think all of us said we'd be surprised if they were able to pull out both Oregon and Penn State and maybe they could win one. And obviously, I mean, Penn State becoming what it's become this season is a factor in how that happened, but Oregon is a top 10 team that Indiana went on the road and, they're still a top 10 team that Indiana went on the road and beat. I mean, it's been a month and a half since that game. That's still maybe the best win in all of college football this season. And yeah, don't lose sight of that.
Yeah. And Oregon has still only lost one game at Autzen since 2022. And it was that game against Indiana. So it's, is Indiana's schedule as difficult as some others? No, but I think that win at Oregon kind of put that whole conversation to rest, in my opinion. Like, if you can go to Autzen and beat a top 5 Oregon team, which they were at the time, top 10 now, you can compete with just about anybody, in my opinion. Now, can they do it, 3 games in a row and actually finish a completely undefeated season? We'll have to find out on that. But first up is that Purdue game. That will be at 7:00 Friday evening, Black Friday, at Ross-Ade Stadium. I cannot wait to see what that stadium looks like from a crowd standpoint. I'm kind of stunned that Purdue announced a blackout for that game. I don't know what they were exactly going for with announcing a blackout. There's so many fun jokes you can have with that,
Well,
including going to your own funeral wearing black.
I mean, are we really surprised that they're doing a blackout on Black Friday?
I mean, is that what they were going for?
I don't know. I mean, one of their colors is black, but I mean, it's just.
But
I don't
what you
know.
don't want is to say it's a blackout and then they pan out to the crowd and it's all red.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I
here's the
may
thing. Yeah, there's going to be enough IU fans there that some of them will also be wearing whites, which it's not going to be just a full sea of red among black. Like there's going to be people
right.
wearing white. There's going to be IU fans that aren't wearing any, that are wearing like navy blue winter jackets in that weather. Like not everybody's got like IU winter jackets that are going to be on. Like there's going to be plenty of IU fans, but I don't know. I don't read that much into, especially with the elements. I don't read that much into the blackout because I mean, there's only a few teams in the country that can, pull off real stronger atmospheres like that. You got the Penn State whiteout. I mean,
Right.
Purdue's got to just trying to get some sort of energy going.
Another thing they could have been thinking is like just to prepare yourself for the misery of this game. Come drunk and black out at the game. How about that?
Maybe.
Maybe. I'm trying to give you the benefit of the doubt, Purdue, because I don't think that's going to turn out in your favor if they show crowd shots in this game. But we'll see. Again, Friday night, 7 o'clock NBC for the regular season finale, and we'll kind of see how that goes, see what the future holds for the Big Ten championship game and the CFP soon thereafter. But I think for now we can wrap it up. He is Seth Tao. I am Mike Schumann. For the Daily Hoosier and the East 17th Street podcast, we will connect with you